This Instructable details how to create a COVID-19 Christmas tree decoration. I started by creating a basic design of what I wanted the decoration to look like. Then I worked out the layout of the pegs and the locations. Each of those pegs have a different degree offset around so we can space them accordingly. Then I created roughly what I wanted each peg to look like and worked out the variables that I'd be using or the parameters I'd be using. So start by going to Browser, New Component, and create a new component in Fusion 360. Then modify, change parameters, and add each of those parameters that we added to the sketch earlier. Each of these parameters were set to a default value. It's possible to come back and edit these values later. Once all the values have been added, we need to go to Solid and create a new sketch and select the plane. From the origin, create a centre circle of the ball radius times 2. Go to Sketch, then Line, then bisect the circle from the origin, then select Solid, Revolve, and revolve the object around the centre axis. That will give you the sphere. It is always good to rename the sketches and the bodies so that we can use them later. Create a new sketch by going to Solid, Create Sketch, and call it Pin Sketch. Then using the origin, draw out the ball radius, and then using rectangles, lines and other shapes you can then draw the shape of the peg that you are wanting. Now we need to create the pin with the rectangles, lines and splines. Using the parameters that we created earlier, I create the various parts of that peg that we designed in the drawing program and then add various shapes. The bottom of the peg we need to be flush with the circle of the ball. So create a new arc with the ball radius and then drag it round so it intersects where the base we've drawn is. Now we have a curve that we can use as part of the peg. Then using a fit point spline, I'm able to draw roughly what I would like the peg to look like, adding in various points where I want to place the values, and then finally at the bottom of the peg, and then click on the tick to finish. It's now possible to adjust this spline curve accordingly to get the shape that we desire. We will edit the peg multiple times to get the correct visualization that we're after. Once we are happy with it, we are able to select the parts of the sketch, then click on Solid, Revolve, and revolve the object around the central axis. That will give us the 3D representation of the peg. By looking at the peg you can tell whether it's the right shape and then can go back to modify and change parameters to change the overall size of the item. So we can change the size of the base or the minimum maximum radiuses. If we aren't happy with the curve, we are able to go back in and edit the sketch. Editing the spline curve allows us to change the overall curves and size and feel of the peg itself. It may take multiple attempts to get the peg that you desire. When we're happy with the peg, we should rename the bodies accordingly so they're easier to reference later on. Then, select the peg, right click and do Move Copy. Set the pivot point by clicking on the icon, select the central origin and then click the tick on the set pivot. Create the copy using the tick box and then move the peg using the drag options, or you can use the numeric values. When you're happy with the location, click OK. Right click on that peg that we've just copied and repeat the process. Set the pivot. Remember to click on the green tick afterwards. Create a copy and then move it into position. It is possible now to select multiple pegs and copy those. This will speed up the process. Select multiple by holding down Shift and clicking the two items. Set the pivot for both the items. Create a copy and then move into position. This needs to be repeated for all of the pegs that are wanted. Once the top half of the pegs have been created, it's possible then to select the entire row of pegs, copy them and then move them all into position. It is possible then to move entire rows of pegs around the x-axis to make it look more organic. If you only want to print this as a single solid object, then now is the time to export it. Export the single peg at the top so we can use it later. So click on it and create a new body. Then we have to copy that peg back. I'm sure there's an easier way of doing this. Now we need to cut the pegs away from the body. So go to Modify and then Combine. Select the ball as the first object, then select all of the pegs as the target bodies. Make sure the operation is set to cut and click OK. That removes all of the pegs from the ball. Make sure we save the project because we've done a lot of work and we don't want to lose it. Now we want to go to Browser, the ball component and save as an STL file for printing. Now going back to the peg that we copied earlier, we have one peg. First thing, we need to duplicate this by going to the peg and move copy. We don't need to set the pivot point, but we do copy it. Then go to Sketch, create a sketch on the same plane, and then add a circle where we want the hole to be. Once the circle has been drawn, select it, go to Solid, Extrude, and then extrude with the direction of symmetrically. Now we have a hole going through one of the pegs. Make sure the operation is set to cut and click OK. Each of these pegs can now be exported individually. When printing the pegs, first of all, make sure we only print one of each. That allows us to finally adjust the print compared to the ball. Import the ball STL into your slicing software. Slice the ball with support on the build plate only. Print the ball and the peg separately. Only print a couple of pegs at the start. This allows you to go back and finely tune the sizes. I found I needed to add a 0.2mm reduction in the size of the bottom peg to allow it to fit into the ball properly. I printed the pegs in batches of 9. As these are small items, it is possible that if one dislodges, it will ruin the entire print. When printing the pegs, make sure there are at least 4 perimeters. This allows a solid peg. Anything less will involve in breakages. I also added a change of filament colours for the top.